And welcome everyone to this working session called Community-Driven Data as Means to Foster Equal Rights and Non-Discrimination. My name is Peter Koblowski. I'm working at the International Civil Society Center, which is a hub for international NGOs. I welcome everybody here in The Hague. I'm also in The Hague in a little booth called North America. So also I invite everybody of you who is in The Hague to visit me after the session. I will be here up for discussion.
Conmigo después de la
North
sesión.
America. Sorry, somebody is speaking. I couldn't. I hope people can hear me well. Yes, so again, I welcome you to this session. And our today's agenda is we will have 3 national case studies dealing with community-driven data, which means data that is produced by marginalized communities and that is used as monitoring data to measure the progress of these communities against the SDG indicators. We will also have a discussion with the audience, so please don't get too relaxed. We want to engage you, so we are collecting your questions and we want to discuss them together with our input providers. And we will have an international expert panel where we will have various representatives from NGOs. We will also have a child speaker from Bangladesh, and we have a representative from the National Statistics Office in Nepal. And as the last agenda point, we want to have a discussion with you on what are the relations between equity and equality, and in how far can such inclusive tools like citizen-generated data actually be a contribution to that. And so again, why are we here at the World Justice Forum? You heard this morning in the opening speech from the High Commissioner on Human Rights, justice means to leave no one behind, and to us, and also to the Justice, the High Commissioner, as we have heard this morning, leave no one behind means that marginalized groups are entitled to take part in decision-making processes. Only by that, we can ensure that they are not left behind. And I think the High Commissioner is absolutely right by saying that. And this is also the motto of the Leave No One Behind partnership that I want to introduce to you now. We are a group of international and national NGOs. We work very closely with community-based organizations in 7 countries around the globe. And our motto is to make the voices of marginalized communities heard and count. What that means is best explained in a video. And I hope the technique works now and you can hear the sound and see the video. No sound. Captions. Yes, thanks for your attention. I heard that the sound might not have come across that well, but luckily we had made this video accessible also by adding captions and by also sign language. So I hope you got the most out of it. And just really to recapitulate, our background is the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. The issue we are aware of is that there is not enough official data, not enough statistical data on marginalized groups, which means their situation is often not recognized by policymakers. And hence we are dealing also with some gaps in terms of policy making and public services, which are often not accessible to these groups, also due to the lack of evidence about them. And our perception is because of this, the overall ambition to leave no one behind, the big promise behind the SDGs, is at risk. And we have set up this partnership in 2017, the INGOs, so the big names, World Vision, Save the Children, Transparency International. But we also bring together think tanks, national NGOs, and local grassroots NGOs, community-based organizations in more than in 7 countries at the moment. And in total, we have about 100 members in this partnership, mostly from civil society. And yeah, we're active in these countries that you can see here: Bangladesh, India, Kenya, Nepal, Vietnam, Malawi, and Denmark. And what we're doing, we perceive ourselves to be globally led and globally connected. So we also want to give our local partner organizations in the countries, the NGOs on the ground, a global platform. So we go with them to international conferences like where we are today at the World Justice Forum. We are also at the high-level political forum of the UN. We go to the regional SDGs forums and so on. And we are publishing various reports and insights that really come from this national level work that our national partners do with this community-driven data. We also do capacity building for local NGOs and for national NGOs. We provide trainings for them to build capacities to produce monitoring data. And we're also setting up a program where we're offering these visualized data platforms. So platforms where NGOs can upload their monitoring data on the SDGs, which then also can be used as a tool for advocacy with decision makers. Yeah, we work with international partners. We have produced various reports in the last years that have been also presented at the high-level political forum. We are very much into understanding how data partnership works and how data can also play a role in extraordinary situations like the global COVID pandemic. And we're also working now with the United Nations Statistics Division, who is supporting us to develop toolkits for how civil society data can be used in policy making. And I don't want to give you more details at this stage about our work, because it's much more important that you hear it directly from our national representatives. So, and with that, I would like to actually hand over to our first presenter. And we will have 3 presenters. One presentation comes from India by Annie Namala. She is the convener of the campaign Wada Na Todo Abhiyan, which means don't break our promise. And this will be followed by Chris Chinkota from CARE Malawi. He will tell us about the work of the partnership in Malawi. And lastly, we will have an input from Nepal, from Shika Shrestha from VSO Nepal. And yeah, with that, I would like to hand over to Annie. Annie, are you there?
Yes, Peter. Thank you. I'm here. Thank you.
Perfect.
Can you
so
see
then
me?
I can.
Yeah.
I cannot see you, but I hope the audience can see you. If not, can we see her?
Yes, we can see you. See you, Annie. Thank you.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
And Annie, I can start your slideshow.
Yeah, you will do that. Thank you. Thank you, Peter, and also for the World Justice Forum to giving us this opportunity to share the kind of work we are doing, particularly with the most vulnerable communities. As Peter said, I come from India with a network platform, civil society platform called the WNTA platform, We are a large civil society platform across the country. We focus on a governance review of the government and also on the SDGs with a focus on the leave no one behind principle. Next, Peter. So why does it become so important to look at this principle, and why does it become important to look at data from marginalized communities? I think India is a perfect example where you have large population groups who are historically disadvantaged, socially excluded, and continue to not be represented in the data systems to the extent that the government can make adequate policies for them. I would say that about 50% of our population face one kind of social exclusion or the other, which may be because of their social identity, ethnic identity, religious minority status, their occupational status. So we do have about 50% of our population who are disadvantaged and socially excluded, whose data do not come into the public space adequately, and so there is always a gap between them and others. So I think our concern is that in both justice issues and development issues, these communities need to be brought to the fore adequately to do policies and development for them. Next, Peter. So how do we do this? What we do is we identify the vulnerable communities, because most, as you know, from civil society organizations, we do work with vulnerable communities. So we identify vulnerable communities with civil society organizations. We do participatory action with them, which are the data is actually collected by the community members. So we have champions from the community who are trained to gather mobile data, and then we have further focus group discussions, bring this data together, even to the extent of looking at intersectional issues for children, for urban poverty. So the whole exercise over the last 2-3 years for us has been building data sets of almost about 35 communities that we have done over the last 2-3 years. In each space, we build the data with the participation of the community volunteers and bring it into the system, which is like a public domain for us. Peter? Next. So, how does data, community disaggregated data, help to create the space and opportunities for marginalized communities? If you would look at the national data of India, it would say, we have access to health, we have access to education, we have so many other schemes which the government is popularizing and making it public. But if you really look at the way in which marginalized communities access it, what we found is when it comes to, the inequality is so high. When it comes to construction workers or migrant workers, hardly a child gets to the midday meal that is available in the school. And if we are looking at issues like, popular schemes like housing schemes, fuel schemes, we see that most of these communities have very little access to any of these schemes, even though they have been running for a long time. The state is putting a lot of resources behind it, but the state does not have the data to see what is the inequality between these communities and the national data. So one of our areas that we look at is how do these communities access the government provisions that are meant to be for development schemes. Next, Peter. Next slide. Yeah, so like I said, one core area where we look at is how do these communities access the state's resources, the state schemes that are very popular schemes. The second is also, in terms of their access to technology in these days, because most of the government schemes, you need technology to even access those schemes. And you find that particularly in tribal communities, which are forest dwellers, there is 0% internet availability. hardly anybody has technology, tools and instruments. So we find that the gap in technology is so high that they are really not able to connect to these schemes. And so it's important to bring this data out to say that in certain pockets like this, the technology gap is very high, the internet availability is low. So how do we bring that to the focus of the state? That's another thing that we do through this community data. Next slide. See, another thing that we find is also like there are historical disadvantages that these communities have, either because of social exclusion, lack of education, lack of employment opportunities, and these are really not brought into the data. Like if you see, when we studied some of the vulnerable communities, we found that about 70% of these members had started their employment at the age of 10 years. It's almost like, the child labor is so embedded in these communities. When you talk to people like LGBT communities or sex workers, street hawkers, one of the key areas that they find is a threat from the state authorities in terms of violence. And so what you really see is that the historical disadvantages and the current situations need to be mapped to understand the specific disadvantages that these communities have. So even today, in terms of lack of access to schemes, in terms of lack of access to technology, in terms of the continued prevalence of some of the disadvantages, I think community data becomes very, very important to be brought up for moving towards a more equitable system. Next. Peter, next. So I think that in some ways the work that we have done is also fairly new and innovative now because this data is not available in the public. So we've been part of trying to highlight the community's issues in various forums. So with the VNR in Voluntary National Review in 2020, the civil society really worked with 16 communities to bring their data and their recommendations to the VNR, which got featured in the VNR report in one chapter under the Leave No One Behind title. Next. So another thing that we've been involved is again in trying to look at the impact of COVID. So here we've been collaborating with the UN agencies to look at the impact of COVID among the most vulnerable communities. Currently, about over 1,000 community volunteers are involved in collecting data of their communities in terms of access to various safety measures, social protection, resources, as far as children and women and incomes of the families are concerned. So what I'm sort of feeling is that once we develop this methodology, maybe we can encourage and convince the state to engage in community-generated data that would bring up the situation of these communities. The next, Peter. So where do we see the challenges? We see the challenges. One is, we may bring up evidence, but to come to a level of policy is a long travel from, convincing government, building in the resources. So it's a long way from evidence to policies. And the second dimension that we see, particularly in India, is that civil society space is shrinking. There's limited space for dialogue, and the state is unwilling to really accept community data. So I think these are the challenges that we currently face. And if we look at the way forward, the next slide. Next slide. So in moving forward, we feel that the global level needs to really invest in community-generated data so that, this principle of not leaving someone behind, having a more equitable, inclusive SDG can be realized. And we feel that we need to track some key goals like goal 1, 5, 10, 16, and strengthen the whole leave no one behind principle within the SDGs. And we also feel that it is important to have this data in a public space through a dashboard or other mechanisms so that people will have access to this community-generated data at any point in time. I will stop here, Peter. I hope I've been audible and could be heard. Thank you.
Sorry. I cannot share my screen and unmute myself at the same time. I hope you can hear me now. Yes, and with that, thank you, Annie. With that, I would like to hand over to Chris. Chris, are you there?
Yes, Peter, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, Chris. Just to announce, we are already 5 minutes behind schedule. It would be great if you can keep the input to 5 minutes. Yeah, that would be great.
Thank you.
All right, handing over to you.
Should be able. Thank you very much, everyone. So I think much has already been shared in terms of looking at the bigger picture of what Leave No One Behind is all about. What I'm going to present is much of the fact-finding kind of exercise which we are actually done because we are just new entrants into this kind of coalition. Next, Peter. Thank you very much. I will give a brief a background of what the Malawi partnership, this is the Malawi Leave No One Behind coalition. So like I already said that we collected data just to understand the dynamics around how Malawi as a country is doing around SDG 10, which is to do with fighting inequality and making sure that no one is left behind. So to do this, we looked at social protection, narrowing down to 2 key national flagships and around social protection. And this is the agricultural aspect, which is looking at affordable inputs program, which is supported by government. And then we also have the social cash transfer, which is largely depending on donor funds. So in terms of our team in Malawi, we have our local CSOs talking about the examples include the national network of the elderly, Do for Children. We have the Center for Social Accountability. These are local NGOs, but we also have Plan International and CARE, which represent the INGOs. We also have government with us to help influence policy, and this is the National Planning Commission, which is steering the Agenda 2063 for Malawi in terms of our national vision, but also have the Ministry of Gender. And finally, as part of the team, we also have the Residence Office of the United Nations. Next. So in terms of the design of our data collection, we've actually sampled 3 districts, and these are in different key 3 regions of the country, just to make sure that each of the regions is represented. And within these community settings, our sample is a representation of 3,000 households. And in terms of this collection, we used a tool known as the community scorecard so that we are able not only to collect this data, but also solicit some feedback from the key parties. The key parties of our interest in terms of this data collection, we looked at the communities themselves, which includes the most vulnerable groups, but also the service providers of those key programs that I shared earlier on. So we are doing qualitative data analysis at the moment, depending on the issues that we actually identified. And these issues also led to actions, and action plans were developed to make sure that we are able to get this data to national and global level conversations. And the issues that embedding all these programs includes there are cultural issues. We also have some structural issues to do with district level implementation, but also policy issues at national. So we tried to use various approaches, but the key within this of the community scorecard, and we also had some approaches that to facilitate strengthening the monitoring system. In terms of national level, we are using the Citizen Data Hub. This is a central data bank where all issues that are generated at local level find their way in at national level. And this Citizen Data Hub, we do not only have data from the Leave No One Behind, we also have other like-minded partners within several SDGs who are also tracking some data, and that data is there just to make sure that we are able to do some data-based decisions at national level. But we also have linkages with various structures to make sure that we are able to monitor issues that are emerging from the grassroots. And we are also using the tool to make sure that we have the number of reports on all issues that are emerging that needs some kind of interventions to change such. Like I said, in the end, these issues are escalated through dialogue forums at various levels. So I can just give a picture to my right. As you can see, we have two community social groups that are sharing their experiences and whatever issues they encounter. And to our left on top, we see a national level representative who came down during an interface meeting just to make sure that he is able to provide feedback real time. Can get to the next slide. So this slide is just providing a synopsis of some of the issues that were actually identified. So we are talking about there are issues around beneficiary selection process, community involvement in decision-making, limited stakeholder collaboration, community support systems, timeliness in terms of distribution of these support initiatives, but also there were issues to do with complaints and feedback response mechanisms. We can get to the last slide. So thank you very much. I guess that's all that I wanted to share with you, Tim. Thank you, Peter. Over to you.
Thank you, Chris. I have to unmute myself again, interrupting the presentation. Thanks a lot indeed. And we come to our third input from Nepal. Is Shika there?
Hi, Peter. Yes, I'm here.
Yes, perfect. Yes. So I hand over to you, Shika. And please try to remain within the 5 minutes. We have to keep time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Next slide, please. Thank you, World Justice Forum. Can you hear us? Good, Peter? Thank you, World Justice Forum, for providing us this opportunity to share our joint initiative from LNOB Consortium and specifically from Nepal. Next slide, Peter. In terms of Nepal, as Peter said earlier, we are also the consortium of the NGOs and INGOs, and we have decided to work together on strengthening the capacity of civil society organization in generating the inclusive data that can be used as evidence for informed decision-making. And we are also strengthening the multi-stakeholder engagement on strengthening the progress on SDGs. And it has contributed on strengthening the voice and agency of the community, especially the marginalized ones, and also holding the duty bearer account for protecting the rights of the marginalized people. Next slide, please. In terms of the LNOB context, as Peter said earlier, the UN endorsed the LNOB framework in 2016. In 2017, the global consortium was launched, and after 1 year, our consortium in Nepal was launched. Since our inception, we started using the citizen-generated data, as someone said earlier, using the community scorecard for monitoring the progress against SDG 5. Later, we realized that SDG 5 only is not the gender agenda. We also started exploring the progress on other SDGs. And in 2020, we also got opportunity to be engaged in providing inputs on our voluntary national review, and the formal report of the National Commission has also acknowledged our input. That clearly indicates that citizen-generated data will also be acknowledged by the government agencies if that is done with the consistency and the rigorously followed methodologies. And we also recently engaged on the SDG data partnership initiatives. Next slide, please. In terms of the SDG data partnership, it is the joint project of GIZ, the Danish Institute for Human Rights, and International Civil Society Center, together with our LNV consortium, mostly the NGO Federation in Nepal, together with different agencies. It has enabled the civil society to work very closely with the government agencies to build a much more streamlined method for creating the citizen-generating data in the form of toolkit. Next slide, please, Peter. And we have also used this methodology, not only the tracking progress and the accountability of the duty bearers, but also as the means for self-reflection of the civil society. I'm presenting you the one example where we did this, this as the tool for the self-reflection of the civil society organization. If we see the result, there has been good progress in the areas of leadership, advocacy, and the financial and administrative management. Sometimes it is also possible that after having much more learning on the much more to be done, there can also be the scores that can also be reduced. Like in this case, the result on the sustainability, resilience, and relevance has been decreased from the previous year. So we strongly feel that civil society should also be using this tool to understand where they are on their efficacy, so that they can be a strong agent in building the civil society voices and the concern, especially amplifying the voices of the marginalized communities. Next slide, please. And if we see some of the wow moments for us, we have received lots of the commitment from our local government authorities for creating the participatory planning to achieve the different progress targets within the national targets of the SDGs, as well as increased budget for empowerment of the marginalized communities. As said earlier, federal government has also acknowledged our citizen-generated data and also had the much more realization on the relevance of this data for equitable development. Moreover, Civil Society Alliance has also been strengthened to put much more efforts on standardizing the citizen-generated data procedures and mechanisms. Next slide, please. And there are also challenges. We bring the marginalized communities and duty bearers in the same platform. However, the marginalized voices are not heard because they are so much downtrodden by the underlying systematic discrimination and unequal power relationships. There are also not agreed standard format of citizen-generated data, so the data's reliability and the quality is always also always the point of the concern. We all always believe that citizen-generated data can bring a huge impact on behind concept materialization. However, the investment in this area is very low. Next slide, please. In this context, we are working together to build a robust partnership with civil society and the government agency to address the concerns of the quality and the reliability by lobbying together to increase meant for institutionalization and systematization of citizen-generated data. We are also working towards to increase commitment to address systemic discrimination so that those voices which are not unheard are much more heard and amplified. That can ultimately contribute in promoting agenda of leave no one behind to ensure sustainable, equitable development is there in the global level. Thank you very much. Over to you, Peter.
Yes, I'm back as well. Thank you, Shika. And thank you, everybody, Annie and Chris, for the 3 inputs. Remember, our theme today is community-driven data as a tool to foster equality and non-discrimination, also with a question mark, because you have heard also from all the 3 input providers, there are some challenges related to it. For example, that there are no recognized guidelines for how to use this and how government could work with this kind of data. So thanks for this, really impressive inputs. And I would like to just quickly stop sharing my screen and hand over to the audience. This is the Q&A round, and now this is your chance to interact with our speakers. In case you have any questions, please, you can either use the chat or you can just also go ahead and open your microphone and let us know if you have any questions addressing any of the speakers. And yeah, Anna just said, please make use of the chat. Of course, that's the official recommendation so that not everybody speaks all at once. So if you have any questions, please write them now. Give you a couple of seconds, of course. But also, if you find it easier, just open your microphone and go ahead. I see a hand going up from Lara. Lara, can you open your microphone?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thanks to all the speakers.
Please say who you are. Yes, Lara.
Yes, I am Lara Manbeck. I'm with the International Development Law Organization. And something I focus on in my work is trying to promote gender equality through the rule of law. So I'd love to hear from the speakers on potentially how we might, in these data exercises, reach women who are often left behind or aren't as connected as men to things like surveys and other methods of data collection.
Great. And who would you address with the question?
I will leave it to you. Perhaps the first speaker, but I'm not positive who might be best placed to speak on this.
Yes. So Annie, this is a question addressed to you then.
Yeah, maybe I can very briefly come in onto this. Lara, I mean, like what our strategy has been that in the marginalized communities, there is very limited data that is available in the public space. So the community generated data actually provides us an opportunity to bring this data up. And it is because the community volunteers are part of the data collection. Like just as an example, currently we are doing the COVID impact across 1,000 habitations with UNICEF. And what we have done is about 70% of the data enumerators are women from these communities, because much of the data is also trying to look at women's access to social protection, women's access to health, access to children's benefits. So one strategy that we have found is to ensure community generated data is done by community volunteers. And secondly, to take the extra effort to let women be the data enumerators too. I mean, like those are two things that I can build into the system at this point in time. And also have certain questions in terms of specific access to sexual and reproductive health support, issues of protection in the public space. So some of those specific questions, and particularly we also looked at LGBT and sex worker communities. Again, that's a subcategory from within the women. So how do you look at issues of theirs? So I think it would be possible to do that, provided we are able to take that extra additional effort to bring their data. Thank you. Over, Pete.
Sorry, I just realized I was not on mute, causing technical issues on my end. Very sorry for that. Do you have another question? Anybody in the audience? I think there's just one coming in from Santosh from BSO Nepal. I just read it out if you don't mind. It's a question addressed to Chris. You mentioned the use of a citizen data hub. Can you please elaborate who and how this hub is operated?
Thank you very much. Can I go ahead, Peter?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a great question indeed. So talking about the Citizen Data Hub, like I said, this is more of a central level data repository, which specifically would address multiple individuals in terms of their involvement in any form of development initiatives. So at the moment, I know of World Vision, I know of VSO, I know of CARE International, and I know of other civil society organizations that are local in various countries that are a part to this kind of innovation. It is actually championed by a consultant known as Quantu. These are the guys that actually are championed building this. So at the moment, there are discussions, especially in terms of access, to say how do we make it open source, and at the same time balance the issue to do with data protection from different individual NGOs. So that's what I can say about the data hub at the moment. But the idea is to make sure that we have a collective kind of response mechanisms, including government agencies, to be able to get this information and be able to respond effectively. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. Santosh already answered, so this seems to have answered your question. Yeah, thanks for all your questions from the audience. I think we have to move on, looking at the time. And our next agenda point is our panel. And I would like to ask Deepesh to come to our panel. Deepesh, can you hear me?
Yes, Peter, I can hear you. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's start with you. This is Deepesh Paul-Thakur, everyone. And Deepesh brings over 21 years in national and international development experience with him. And he has, he's currently the Senior Director, Local to Global Advocacy and Impact at World Vision International. And for those of you who don't know, World Vision is one of the largest NGOs in the world with offices in over 100 countries, focusing on supporting children. And Deepesh, I think you have some slides, and I had two questions prepared for you. So let me just read them out, because I cannot show you your slides and look at my notes at the same time. Limitation. My question to you is, can you explain to us how you are using data as a strategic tool for social accountability at World Vision, and how citizens or marginalized communities are engaged with this? And can you please also let us know in how far the communities are really benefiting from this, and in how far this work that you're doing can be considered as a contribution to foster equal rights and equality? So these would be my two questions. to you.
Sure, sure. And once you are able to share the slide, Peter, I would be able to, provide answers to the questions that you have raised from the experience that we have in social accountability across many countries.
I think I'm there.
Okay.
Can you see the screen now?
Not yet. It's coming in.
No, not yet. How about now?
Yeah, now.
Yes, now, yes. We go to the next slide. And thank you for those introduction, and thank you for our various speakers who spoke about really the agenda on leaving no one behind. We go to the next slide. I'm cognizant of the timing here. Peter, could you go to the next slide? Just to tell you about World Vision's experience in community-driven data, we use a proven approach, which is called Citizen Voice and Action. It's a social accountability tool, which is used across more than 48 countries, 690 programs across the world. The approach is led by the community, and it emphasizes on community development practices such as participation, inclusion, ownership, sustainability, but it starts with really enabling communities with information on their rights. Civic information or civic education is one of the important aspects of this. Then in this approach, the community and the marginalized group are able to voice their concerns through scorecard and providing input in the monitoring standards, so forth and so on, which leads to a dialogue with the various stakeholders, particularly the government, and then it results in a plan of action to improve the service facilities. And through this process, we really have volumes of data that is collected, and the tool is employed to really engage communities to raise their voices through monitoring standards and scorecard. We also have mobile application in which it is very handy to really use the information, and the aggregated information gives a various good picture for further lobbying and advocacy. Let me share with you some of the examples, anecdotal examples from various countries. In the next slide, we'll be able to see that. Peter? So, social accountability, or the citizen-generated data or driven data, contributes in bringing people into the process of calling for their accountable delivery and policy commitment at the local government. And we've seen through a project funded by World Bank in Indonesia how it helped the health facilities to improve, but more importantly, it helped communities to be on the table, the marginalized communities be on the table at the decision-making processes, and it really helped to address the power dynamics which goes in any community service, etc. It also helps, I know there was a question about really leaving no one behind. It also helps highlights and situation pertaining to those often left behind. I have visited Nabojatra project in Bangladesh funded by USAID, and here we were targeting the vulnerable groups, particularly the women, into the process of providing input through the scorecard and the interfaces meeting. And it really helped communities, women, to provide voice in terms of how do they feel about their services for the health post, for the water facilities, so forth and so on. We go to the next slide. I just also wanted to illustrate that the community-driven data also helps ensuring that the public services are working and it's fit for everyone. And a recent evaluation done across many of the projects in World Vision illustrated that from the score of 49% as a functionality of receiving services, after we implemented this approach, it grew to 88%. And the respondent acknowledged about receiving services irrelevant of where or which caste or creed or constituencies they come from. We also find that the social accountability or citizen voice and action brings services physically close. I remember a project in Nepal as well as in Kenya, in which through this process, the communities and the vulnerable groups were able to voice out their concerns because they had to walk a long way to access health services. In this case, in Kenya, they were able to have the health centers established near the facilities. We go to the next slide, and probably it will be 1 or 2 slides more. Just talking about this massive program that we have, we are able to put this program into a database, and we can see from the database where and which areas the services are going well by marking it in color through yellow, red, and green. And that gives an idea about the governance systems, the budget allocation, the civic space in those particular communities where this is implemented. And the aggregated information could be used again for lobbying, for improved services at the local level or at the national level. And my last slide, Peter, is that it's not only about the geographical services. Through the scorecard, we are able to identify which group of people or the community and what are their feeling about the services. It may be the girls and boys may be feeling aside through the services, or the woman may be feeling left behind. And through this, we were able to find out which are those constituencies, which are those groups, to really bring them up front for policy dialogue and improve services. I really hope Konok, my child advocate from World Vision Bangladesh, is able to share about the lived experience in which through this he was able to really implement the nuances of Child Rights Act in Bangladesh. And Konok would be sharing his experience that how he participated in this process to implement the services through the police in his community. So over to you, Peter, and I really look forward to listening to Konok. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Deepesh. Thank you also for answering the questions. I didn't have any additional. And yeah, I would like to hand over to Konok now, and I really hope the technique works and is with us today. Konok, can you hear us? We can see you at least. But we cannot hear you well, I think, or is it only me? No.
Yeah, it seems he has a problem.
Yeah, I think your sound is not working well. Do you have somebody who can maybe help you with a headset, with a microphone? Maybe that would help. Konok, if somebody is there who can help you, maybe, yeah, something is happening. Okay, great. We hope this works. I think the sound is still not working well. We cannot hear you, unfortunately. Anna, I think we had the same problem with Shika. How was it solved? Do you remember?
Yes, like she basically went through her app in the computer, not the browser. So maybe there is an issue, but I have been talking with Konok, and I don't know if it is his internet.
Okay, so I'm a bit afraid there is no easy answer problem. If you can use, I don't know, if you use the browser, you can use your app on the cell phone to reconnect. Maybe it works this way. Do you hear that? Apparently, it helps for Shika if you use your cell phone app instead of the browser. You could try it. So we would come back to you maybe after the next speaker. Let's try it like that while you try to connect.
Peter, just to inject what Konok was speaking, he is a part of a child group member in nearby Dhaka. No, in a community. I forget the name of the community, but his group was associated with the working with the various other group and other stakeholders through the CVA process. And it led to really trying to have the services at the police centers, establishment of a child welfare desk, and also 2 female polices who would be addressing the issues of child marriage, early child marriage, and child labor. And it was fantastic to hear about how his experience was that through his engagement, he was able to mobilize other groups, and there was significant reduction in child marriage and child labor in the communities. I really hope Konark will be able to hear to you in some time soon. Over to you, Peter.
Yes, Konark, we hope you can reconnect in the meanwhile, and we would really like to hear that from you. This is really fantastic what you have done there. And maybe just while we're setting this up, let's hand over to the next speaker first, and we will try to come back to Konark later. So I would ask Alex now to come to the stage. Alex, are you there?
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Alex. Yeah,
Hi, Peter,
so
can you hear me?
For the slide disruption, we can hear you and we can see you. Thank you very much. Just a quick introduction. Alex is a consultant specializing on data on aging and development. And previously he led the Global Age Watch program and some data work at Help Age International, which is also an INGO focusing on the situation of older people. Alex, you're calling in from the UK today. And I would like to open the discussion with you with one question, namely, can you explain to us how you work with older people and how far they're also directly engaged in some of your projects that you're doing at Help Age and at the Global Age Watch project?
Certainly. Thank you, Peter, and thank you, ICSF, for hosting us. So Help Age work is informed by experiences and voices of older women and older men. And older citizen monitoring is one example of kind of direct involvement of older people in monitoring of policy and services that are relevant and important to them, and kind of advocating and using that evidence to advocate for change with their local authorities. And OCM is based on, or is rooted in a number of principles, and some of them are participation and inclusion, and these principles run through the whole OCM cycle. So older people themselves decide, kind of examine the issues that are important to them, and they decide on what they would like to address and what they would like to monitor. They identify and train older citizen monitors. They develop methodology and data collection tools, as well as participate in analysis and validation of the results. And as I mentioned, part of the process is kind of the advocacy bit that older people lead on in dialogue with their government. This is all done in support, with support from Help Age and its partners, and an important part of it is also partnership with local municipalities. So that's in a nutshell how older people lead citizen or community-driven data production.
Thanks, Alex. That's great. And could you explain also to the audience in how far you use data actually to fight against ageism and to fight against discrimination of older people? And can you give some positive examples of we have worked with data that's impacted?
I do have an example, and I certainly from the OCM work, and I wonder if I could save it for maybe for the discussion and maybe slightly pivot your question to how community-driven data can challenge some of the kind of stereotypical concepts that we might inadvertently adopt from during data collection. I think, and I think it's important for us as a community to be aware that kind of the traditional concepts and approaches and the tools that we might adopt in monitoring rights might themselves be slightly biased or ageist. And one quick example is, well, how do we define older age or an older person? And traditional statistics would say, well, it's someone age 60 or 65 plus. But is this a good definition in the context of monitoring rights? Well, it isn't. And it's because we are not just our chronological or biological age. And with kind of older age, it's a social construct that is shaped by cultural and social norms, as well as how individuals themselves relate to aging and older age. And I think this is, and the opportunity of citizen community-driven data is to kind of to challenge those stereotypical and traditional concepts and try to broaden it and ensure that our tools are rights-based. So, but I'm happy to kind of highlight the specific example from Bolivia if colleagues are interested. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. And I mean, of course, great also that you kind of forecast. We still have a discussion with the audience. And when your example fits in there, equity versus equality, let's keep it for that, I would say. But thank you a lot already for giving us the insight that you already gave to us. This is very much appreciated. And with that, I would like to ask if, I don't know, if Konok is back or if he's still here. Let's give it a try again. Thank you, Alex. I don't see if Konok is here.
Not yet, Pete. They are trying to get in, having some connectivity. The password issue with Zoom. Yeah.
Okay. All right. In that case, I would say we hand over to Mr. Ramhari Gaire. Are you here? And we come back to Konok later after his input. Ramhari.
Thank you. I'm here.
Yes, perfect. Perfect. So I would like to introduce you first. Ramhari Gaire is a senior statistician at the Central Bureau of Statistics in Nepal. Welcome very much to our panel. And you have started your career as a government statistician back in 1996, and you have a large amount of experience, obviously, gathered as a statistician, and you have been involved in various national poverty measurements in Nepal, leading on the identification also of poor households in the country. And also, it is really in this role of yours that we are very happy to see that that you have been engaged recently in a partnership project with civil society organizations from across Nepal. I think we have briefly heard about it when Shika spoke. So this is the project where also the GIZ Partners for Review is involved, the Danish Institute for Human Rights, and many civil society organizations from Nepal. And the goal of the project is to produce a toolkit for citizen-generated data, helping civil society actors to produce data that is more aligned with statistical standards, and thereby also make this data more useful for policy planning. And now the question is, can you let us know from the perspective of the Statistics Office in Nepal, what are the key learnings from bringing together such different actors to form a national data partnership and to produce something like a toolkit? And how would you describe also the roles of civil society and of the Statistical Office in this kind of partnership that you have set up there?
Thank you, Peter. It's a great opportunity for me to be with you all. In fact, in Nepal, in 2015, we have restructured our federal system. Now we have 3 tiers of government: federal, provincial, and local. So the demand now from the citizen data is high due to the large number of government now. There are 753 local governments 7 provincial governments and national governments. So the data requirement is very high now due to the planning authority has been transferred to even to local level. So the planning processes has been started in different levels of government, and that requirement may not be supported by the Central National Statistical Office. We call it Central Bureau of Statistics in Nepal. So I see there is a need if we have enough data generating capacity in the community level, if we can accumulate, if we can integrate all the data systems from different levels, that will be very much useful for the local level, especially immediate planning. The government, central government cannot provide. These steps will be fulfilled by the community data if we can generate them well. But the problem is, there are some standard definitions, concepts, methodology to produce the data. So data quality is always a concern. NSO has followed many custodian agencies, UN agencies, methodology to produce the data. So these types of capacity may not be available in the local level as of now. But now we have started statistical literacy programs to local level, to lower levels. I think we can use this platform to make it useful for the communities, local level communities, so their data. Especially, we should ask them to produce the data, qualitative one, since probably sampling data is a very typical one that requires more skills and experience. So we expect a more qualitative, immediate response, like sometimes a disaster-related data that can be produced by the local level, and that can be used immediately by the local level, maybe provincial level, even at national level. Because another problem that we face is our frequency of data collection, other than the censuses that we conduct in every 10 years, is very low. Like poverty measurement surveys we have done since last 10 to 11 years back. So, but this large data gaps is there in Nepal. So citizen-generated data might have more importance. But the problem is they need to have a capacity, and they need to have one platform so that we can compile, we can integrate all sorts of citizen-generated data and make them usable first, and then it can be used. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramhari. I think with that, you would have already answered my next question, namely, what needs to happen from your point of view as a statistician to make that data usable? So on the one hand, you say it should be, it should be one platform to bring it to use. But are there any other points where you would say, this data, yes, it has added value, but for us to really use it in statistics policy making, what else needs to happen? I don't know if you have any other thing to add other than what you already said.
I have some examples featured here. Now we have started national data profile that is generally compiled from local level offices, provincial offices, and central governments and universities. We have compiled all the indicators. We have started to compile anyway. Now I think similarly we can produce another data hub like we discussed before. Someone told on that. So that can produce, gather all the information from different agencies if they are reliable, if they can be used. This is one of the important things that we can do. Another part is local level data generation means local level validation. Sometimes like in poverty identification, what we did, we identified the poor household at the center. Then we sent the list of the poor household to the local level, to the ward level, lowest administrative units of Nepal. Then they validate this. And if there is some problem in the validation, some media groups, some local communities, they do report. Sometimes, we also find information from the local media. We do track them, and based on that media complaint, we go back to our identification process and we correct them. So central government is also taking help from the local level in different communities. This is one example. There are some other, ways that make all individuals, communities have their rights, so that they can be identified, they can have their dignity for the data generation. So for that, we need another platform so that we can enhance some basic statistical capacity, not much complicated one, and that can be used for national and local level planning. I think this is the starting point. If we can make some methodologies to aggregate all the data, that can be very useful for local level decision making, immediate data planning. Thank you.
Thank you. This was a very helpful insight, actually, Ramhari. Thank you very much. And with that, I would like to ask one more time to see if the technique now works for Konok. Can Konok please come? Yes, hello. Somebody was speaking. I couldn't see who it was. I think now it works, actually. Konok.
Yes, Peter, it does. Konok can share his remarks. Yeah, Peter, finally, thank God. Yeah.
No, we're very happy that this works. Welcome, Konok, and we're really excited to hear about your experiences of how you have been engaged in the Citizen Voice project. So please just share with us your experiences. We're excited to hear them.
Thank you so much. Firstly, hi everyone. Good afternoon from Bangladesh. This is Konok Roy, President of Suryoday Child Forum under Dhaka East Area Program, World Vision Bangladesh. It is a great opportunity for me to get chance in this important session. I am a child activist and working to establish child rights in my community. From 2019, when I was elected secretary of Suryoday Child Forum, then after I have received some skill and capacity development training like child rights, child protection, life skill, and child leadership and child journalism, etc. From the first time, I came to know the rights of children. I have also understood responsibility towards children, especially most vulnerable. I have also understood my responsibility towards children. Besides my regular study, I have involved with lots of child rights related social activities, try to ensure child protection. In that time, through a community gathering, I become child member of local CVA working group and received training on CVA procedures and Children Act 2013 of Bangladesh, especially on functioning of children affairs desks in police station mentioned in chapter 4. The training and CV activities opened my eyes and my knowledge. I was closely involved with monitoring scorecards sessions, find out the gaps and laws implementation and problems which need to be addressed. During interface meeting with local police officers, I acted as a co-facilitator. We raised the following gaps and the police station which were mentioned in Children Act 2013, like assigning 1 or 2 female police officers, separate child-friendly room with necessary materials and decoration, maintain separate register for children. After arrest, a child immediately communicates with parents to get lawyer support, consider his and her case, and strictly maintain other instructions as per as Children Act 2013. There are some big gaps. The materials and support set up of rooms. Officers in charge agreed upon CVA working group identified gaps. He also committed to solve gaps all raised issues and also asked support from other NGOs and community leaders. Based on CVA working group request and motivation, instantly some commitments came from other NGOs and civil society people, and action plan was developed to minimize the gaps and solve the problem. Based on action plan prepared in interface meeting, we started monitoring action plan on regular basis, discuss with assigned police officers and see the progress. As a result, child help desks in Bhatara police station functioning well. Police officers are very much positive and taking care of children, giving more importance, maintain separate register and other related issues. Through the above progress and initiatives, access of children and parents has been ensured. Child Forum members have well acceptance in the police officers giving attention to children corner immediately when we call them. They extended their support to us stop child marriage, child labor, abuse, and etc. Sometimes they call us from children cases. I would like to give you an example. In a day, police arrested a boy, age of 16, without any reason. Parents of that boy came to Surjodaya Child Forum to get help. They talked to me, then I instantly discussed the matter with CVA working groups member. Then went to the police station, talked to the police officer and make him free. In this way, we, the CVA working group members, are active and doing such type of good works and saving most vulnerable children especially. Also, due to our sincere responsibility, we performed child affairs desks at police station is more functional than before. Due to this type of social work, especially to ensure and establish child rights and save children from all forms of violence. My parents and community people loves me very much. Lastly, I want to give thanks World Vision Bangladesh supporting me to be a successful child leader. Dear all, I am also a good student of 11th grade and continuing my study. So request you to all pray for me, and I hope I can do well and more fruitful works to save all the most vulnerable children in my community and our country. Thank you all. Thanks a lot.
Wow, thank you, Konok. This was a really powerful contribution, I have to say. And it's hard to even ask you any more questions because you have really made this very graspable and understandable to everyone. And I think you have really unleashed also great changes through this project in which you have been engaged. So this was a really, really great presentation. And you also gave a good example with the boy that you mentioned. I would just ask you personally, if you don't mind, for you,
okay,
most important thing that has changed through the project in which you have been engaged, for you personally. Oh, and I think now we have a frozen screen.
Can I answer this question in Bangla? And hello.
I think yes. Now it works again. You were frozen for a second. Now I hear you again.
Can it
Can I speak in Bangla?
Can I speak in Bangla? Hello.
Sure.
Yeah, if Mr. Karim can translate for you afterwards, I think that will be...
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, please repeat your question again. Repeat your question. He is not clear.
Yeah.
Can I ask you to repeat?
I wanted to know what. Yes. For Konok personally, what was the most important change that you have achieved with this project for you?
Change করতে হ্যাঁ
প্রথমত এলাকাটা ছিল থেকে সম্পূর্ণ বিচ্ছিন্ন এবং আমাদের এলাকায় হচ্ছে অনেক নারী নির্যাতন, চাইল্ড ম্যারেজ, চাইল্ড লেবার এগুলো দেখা যেত। কিন্তু বর্তমানে আমাদের সিভিএ গ্রুপ এবং আমাদের চাইল্ড ফোরাম এবং যে সকল কাজগুলা করতে এই সকল কারণ আমাদের এলাকায় চাইল্ড অনেক কম এসেছে, অনেক বেশি। এছাড়াও আমাদের এলাকায় আমাদের প্রত্যেকটি মানুষ অলরেডি সচেতন হয়েছে, আমাদের সামাজিক যে সমস্যাগুলো ছিল এই সমস্যাগুলো নিয়ে সচেতন হয়েছে এবং সবচেয়ে বড় কথা আমাদের যে পুলিশ ছিল তারা আমাদের প্রতি অনেক পজিটিভ হয়েছে এবং যখন আমরা তাদেরকে কোনো কাজে সহযোগিতা করতে চাই তাদের, তখন তারা ইমিডিয়েটলি আমাদের সহযোগিতা করে। এছাড়াও যেটা লোকাল সরকার আছে, আমাদের স্থানীয় কাউন্সিলর, তারাও আমাদের বিভিন্ন কাজে যখনই আমরা তাকে বলি তখনই সে আমাদের কাজে উপস্থিত হয় এবং আমাদের সাহায্য করে। Thank you.
At first, he's saying that the area he is living, and just few years ago, it is included in the city corporation. Before that, it was a crime zone, one kind of crime zone. Lots of crimes were happening there, and lots of problems and related to child rights, child protections. And he is telling that lots of child marriage, child abuse are a regular scenario. And as we are in a member of Child Forum and working closely with the police station and the local administration and local ward councillor, the situation is improving gradually, and they have, due to have a good relation with police, police is extending their support to us to taking this type of initiative. I mean, the initiative to take ensure child protection and abuse and other things. Before he's joining in the CB working group, the situation was almost not so good, and now it's improving because CB working group is working in that area is very perfectly. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, thank you. So overall, you can speak of a big success, as already became clear from your input earlier. So thank you so much, Konok, for letting us know about all this great work that you have done. Yes, with that, I would like to come to the last agenda point. We only have slightly less than 10 minutes left, but it would be we could still have a little discussion with the audience. And you remember that we framed at the beginning that it would be great to have a discussion, equality, equal rights versus equity. Just to give a little introduction, of course, I mean, we're speaking here to a room full of lawyers. All of you know what equal rights and equality before the law is. Equity, however, is the more tricky term, right? Because it assumes that really everyone has equal access to the same opportunities and resources in society. The question is, as we have heard from all these presentations, whether this access to everyone is actually a given. And equity demands us to consider that there are groups in society that have been historically or politically disadvantaged, sometimes willfully, sometimes just out of ignorance. And it doesn't even matter why. It is more important that these groups don't have an equal access to resources and public life in society. So when you speak of equity, you usually hear there is a need for more fairness, recognizing that these people have a different starting point than the majority of society, and hence there are also different needs to support them when it comes to accessing opportunities and resources in society. So what does that mean for us in this discussion and in the World Justice Forum? I assume when I speak with a lot of law experts, it's clear that fairness is a rather vague term in legal terms. And also when we speak of specific groups in society and their needs, is who defines these groups and who defines their needs. And also, well, when you recognize that people have different starting points and different needs, and how far is this still equality before the law and equal rights when we actually consider that people are different and have different needs? So I wanted to invite you to a discussion about these points. I think you have heard very powerful examples why equity indeed is important, but we would also like to involve this audience of international law experts to come back with your perception on this. I mean, do you in your work perceive a conflict between equity and equality? It would be great if you can just share with us some examples and let us know your take on this overall discussion. And yeah, with that, I would like to ask people to either ask their questions in the chat or to raise their hand so that you can come to the microphone. So I think there is a question in the chat. It's a bit longer. Caroline, could you, if you're still here, could you please just open the microphone and maybe ask your question directly or your input? If Caroline is still here.
Yeah, cheese.
Caroline, you're still muted. You have to click on the microphone button so that we can hear you.
The mic is not working.
Ah, the mic is not working. Okay. Sorry, I didn't see that. So, I mean, I can just read out what you wrote. So Caroline from Lawyers Without Borders in France, thanks for this very interesting sharing. In our work, we are trying to include communities and notably community leaders, religious representatives and various actors in different capacities, from citizens to medical, social, legal workers, etc. My questions are, as Conok showed, I was wondering how the efforts of collecting data could in itself foster communication and collaboration amongst all the concerned stakeholders in the community, including the people consulted in the collection of data, and increase their viability or awareness towards one another's issues, challenges and priorities in itself, contribute to the development of further networks amongst them. And as Alex started to mention, how do you ensure that the tools used to collect data are in themselves not relaying bias and not generating further harm, which I'm sure is one of the essentials, maybe even unspoken aim, building these tools. So just to summarize your questions, how can data actually foster communication and collaboration among these communities? And then also, how do you ensure that there is no bias in the data that is generated, which of course should also be an aim of all of these projects. And I think this is a question that I can ask to all people who have presented. So it's Annie, Shika, Chris, Alex, everybody is asked to answer this question. Or these two questions. So one of you, please just go ahead and give Caroline an answer.
Hi, Peter, can I answer? Hi, Peter?
Yes, please, go ahead.
The very good question. Like it's more about. I'm going to answer mostly on to start with the second question. Whenever we engage or we say when we strengthen the networking of most vulnerable and the marginalized community, when we empower them, and when we use the data as the tool to advocate, data as the tool to create pressure on the duty bearers, it is also our one requirement for helping this marginalized community to understand the consequences and to understand the ways how to make their safety as a keep a prime concern. So it is mostly happens while working with the young communities. Young communities generally are full of energy. It's always easy to mobilize the young community, and they consolidate their efforts so much that they go into the boundaries to change the harmful social norms and the practices, and sometimes there can be the consequences. So it's our also duty and the responsibility to also make this young community understand those negative consequences and also help them to understand what would be the tools and the solutions. And to make those data collection procedures and also the analysis process beyond the biasness. Sometimes we feel that we also need to check our biased and
we stopped hearing you. Can you unmute again yourself?
Sorry. Sometime in terms of reducing the biasness, as a coordinator of the data processing, we as the people who are leading this process should also review and reflect those data collection processes and make sure that there are much more participatory approaches and and collect the insights from the people themselves who are marginalized, so that we are addressing those issues of the biasness. And in my presentation, I also share that there is so much of the deep-rooted discrimination and the inequality, even though we feel that we are creating the platform for people to raise their voices, they are not able to raise their voices. So we need to make efforts to capacitate those people so that they are able to raise their voices and also address the negative consequences if there are any. So it is a kind of the continuous process. And for that, we need to bring the government in the leadership, because we need much more investment. And as civil society, we just need to bring some of the models that could work, but it is the process that should be agreed and institutionalized by the government themselves, so that most of the voices are heard and also used as a planning tool. Over to you, Peter.
Could I share just one reflection around the bias?
Go ahead.
I think
after that we have to.
Yeah. I'll be quick. I think I come from the school of thought that because data production is a man-made process, we might not be able to fully eliminate the bias. So we certainly should try to reduce it. And we certainly should be aware of where the potential of the bias and could be at what stage of the data production cycle. So sorry, just a quick reflection. Thank you.
Peter, can I just come in for a second?
Yes, last words from you are always appreciated.
Thank you, Peter. No, I just wanted to bring in one dimension when we talk of equity. See, I feel some of these abstract ways in which we think of development, which are very necessary, like poverty, inequality, and things like that. They are very essential to understand the macro dynamics of things. But I think when we come to equity, it's very important to recognize and name the vulnerable communities that are underserved, that are underprivileged, that are disadvantaged. And I think unless you bring their identity and their concerns onto that identity related, whether it's elderly, young people, marginalized, I think equity is a lot that has to do with the identity and the issues. And we need to really name these communities if we want to make it more equitable. I think that's an important point for equity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shika, Alex, and Annie. I think Caroline already said this answered her question, so this is great. And this were also great concluding statements. I want to thank you all again, everybody who provided an input today. And of course, also thank you to our audience. We are already a little bit over time, so now we have to shut down for real. And as I said, I'm in the room North America here. So if those of you who are here in The Hague can maybe pass by at the room and say hi if you have any further questions to us, I will be glad to answer. And with that, I say thank you and goodbye.